So today I'm going to present my project, Woodstock, 3 Days of Psychedelic Counterculture, and this is based off the documentary Woodstock, the Director's Cut. So before I go any further, I'd like to give an interview of what you're going to see in this project. So first, you're going to see the history of Woodstock with counterculture and the community of Woodstock, slash problems, performance and counterculture activities, legacy of Woodstock, and then encores of Woodstock. So what was Woodstock? Woodstock was formed by John Roberts, Joe Rosenman, Artie Kornfeld, and Michael Lang as an investment opportunity. And the original plan was to gather up the funds after the festival and then open a recording studio in Woodstock, New York. And throughout history, Woodstock has been referred to as an Aquarian experience with 3 days of peace and music. And this is kind of tying into the legacy throughout the documentary. This is what Michael Lang, I believe, would refer to Woodstock as. And Woodstock was held on land in Bethel, New York, rented from Mac Yasgur, a 49-year-old dairy farmer. So now I want to focus on counterculture in the community. So while viewing the raw footage of the Woodstock documentary, it kind of was really like you were watching it on a psychedelic because you saw all these blending cultures and just community and people come together from different backgrounds and social standings and just like histories and everything. And like they all played a beautiful factor in forming this like one piece of art that is like remembered in history. And this is because like it was really a counterculture movement. Like the cultures were emerging with each other and changing for like 3 days in history. And these factors that would play in to make up this kaleidoscope would be the residents of Bethel, official figures, and Woodstock participants. So the residents of Bethel would experience this emergence of 50,000 hippies, which would soon rise to 500,000 hippies. And of course, they would be divided on how they felt. Some people would say that they were all nice and that they were all beautiful people, and that the main objective was to keep them fed and well cared for. And even religious figures would be on their side, with Reverend Don Ganuk, who would serve as community relations for Woodstock. And he would hold sermons on how Woodstock wasn't about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But of course, Woodstock would of course be met with backlash from residents, as some would call it a disgraceful mess, and with the trespassing of property, which of course would result in destruction of property. And some would say that Woodstock was depleting of moral, and that this has nothing to do with Vietnam, that there's no comparison. But despite unevenness amongst residents, Woodstock found a home in Bethel with a strong communal support. And now looking to official figures, and during this time, during 1969, I feel like this was the height of the counterculture movement. I mean, you already have Woodstock going on, but you also have Vietnam going on, and you have you have counterculture, and you also have Vietnam butting heads together. But during this moment in time, they kind of like rose above those problems and supported each other, as the United States Army would lend medical teams to give them a hand. And the people working at Woodstock, they would go over the PA and say, they're with us, man, they're not against us. And there will also be 45 doctors there without pay, just here to help because they dig what Woodstock was about. And even police officials, there's an interview with a chief of police, who, when asked how does he feel about these kids coming into this like land in New York and hosting this festival, he said, I'm very, very surprised, and I'm very happy to say that we think that people of this country should be proud of these kids, despite their flaws, like the way they dress, the way they act, like their beliefs, that their inner workings, their inner selves, their self-demeanor cannot be questioned. And now looking at the participants of Woodstock, who had a front row seat into this mass gathering of people and emerging cultures, Jerry Garcia and Artie Kornfeld would be looking out into the crowd of people. Jerry Garcia would say, it's really amazing, it looks like some kind of biblical, unbelievable scene. And Jerry Garcia was a guitarist for the Grateful Dead, and Artie Kornfeld, who was one of the founders of Woodstock, would say, it's worked out real nice, didn't it? The vibes are so beautiful. And someone in the background would say, everybody helps everybody. And then Swami Satchidania, who would be, I think like 2 weeks prior to Woodstock, he would meet with Mahatma Gandhi's grandson. And Mahatma Gandhi's grandson would ask how America was doing. And this is what Swami told the people of Woodstock. He replied with, he said, America is becoming a whole. America is helping everybody in the material field, but the time has come for America to help the whole world spiritually also. And then Michael Lang, who I said also was another founder of Woodstock, would say, when asked, why is everyone here? Like, what's keeping everyone together? He would say, music has always been a major form of communication. Only now the lyric and the type of music is a little more involved in society than it was. And as I said, I'll get into the performances later, where you'll see like the messages that was being spoke through the music that, you know, really touched the people's minds and souls and everything. And he would also say that the point is it's happening. And of course, Woodstock would run into problems, the biggest being weather. So Friday would be met with full sun, you know, not a problem there, but Saturday and Sunday would be met with constant rain. And I believe it says here Sunday would be met with an inch of rain dumping on the festival. And this, of course, would result in staff rushing to cover electrical equipment and pools of mud flooding the land. And of course, there'd be overcrowding. As I mentioned earlier, there were supposed to be 50,000 attendance initially, but it ended up hosting 500,000 attendants. And this would result in Woodstock becoming a free concert as the fences would be destroyed and ticket booths weren't ready in time. There would be a closure of State Exit 104 off the New York Thruway, which would result in like a standstill traffic for, I believe, 8 to 10 hours. And by Saturday, concert goers would experience sanitary, weather, and food/water problems. And this wasn't covered in the Woodstock documentary, but this was found through outside research. But there would also be technical problems. Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir, who were part of the Grateful Dead, would be shocked by their microphones. Crosby, Still, and Nash, along with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, would complain about the monitors, and Sly and the Family Stone equipment wouldn't function properly. So despite these problems, though, the participants of Woodstock and everyone there would still be a strong community as they all had high spirits. As I mentioned earlier, there'd be people over the PA, and they would come out during the rain and they would say, "Hey, maybe if we think hard enough, we can make this rain go away." And they would do a chant screaming, "No rain, no rain," and the people in the audience would chant it back and join in with them. Once the rain passed, though, there'd be a drum circle where people would come together and kind of like dance, and they would also chant peace, peace, peace. They would be playing in the mud. They would either slide in the mud or they would kind of just like walk around and like throw it at each other, kind of. And also people would be engaging with each other. Joe Cocker, who was a performer at Woodstock, he would say, "I remember I just hung out with some hippies like in a caravan and waited for a few hours until we could get out." And Nancy Einstein, who was an audience member, would go, "We got very friendly with the people in our little cohort as people would huddle together to stay warm during the rain." You know, it was kind of cool to see that like musicians and audience members coming together and meeting up. Like I believe that's one thing that was said in the thing that I was reading about Nancy Einstein, is that she was able to meet some of her like favorite musicians. And looking at the financial side of Woodstock, with all the overcrowding and it becoming a free concert, it of course would be deemed as a financial disaster, but this wouldn't matter to Artie Kornfeld or Michael Lang. They would still have high spirits, as they would say, this culture and this generation away from the old culture and the older generation. You see how they function on their own. These people are communicating with each other. That rarely happens anywhere anymore. Look at what you got there, man. You couldn't buy that for anything. And I believe like that last quote, it really just is what really sums up, as the title says, nothing to do with money. It kind of sums up how, even though this was a financial disaster, I feel like the money really, even though the point was to open a studio, I don't really think the money was the point. I think the point was to bring everyone together and have, you know, just true counterculture. So now we're going to look at the performances. And in this project, I really didn't want to focus heavy on the performances. I kind of wanted to focus more on the community and counterculture aspect of this, of Woodstock. But there were a lot of protest songs actually in Woodstock that I didn't pick up on when I first watched the documentary like a couple of years back. So Richie Havens, who was the first performer, he would come out with his song Handsome Johnny. And in the song would talk about this guy named Johnny who would go to like different like wars, like World War I, then World War II. And and of course that would be a protest song against Vietnam. And then Joan Baez would sing a song Joe Hill and Swing Low Sweet Chariot. And Swing Low Sweet Chariot it's like a protest song. I forget when it got really popular, but it's like a gospel protest song. And Joe Hill, I believe, was about Joan's husband, David, who would be sent to a prison for draft dodging. And before she performed the song, she would mention how he formed a hunger strike with 42 other prisoners, but the other prisoners weren't draft dodges, you could say. So these two songs, I would say, were draft dodge protest and just protest in a whole. And then Jefferson Airplane would do a song called Uncle Sam Blues. And I mean, it's apparent by the title that's a Vietnam protest song. And then Canned Heat would perform A Change Is Gonna Come, which is a song performed by Sam Cooke originally, I believed. And that was a pretty popular protest song, I believe, during like the 50s, 40s or 50s. So you could see, like, you really could see protest through the performance of Woodstock, and it's pretty cool. Like, after honestly taking this class and learning like everything leading up to Woodstock, it's you can kind of see like what songs attribute to what they're protesting. So now we're going to go to the fun part of Woodstock, the counterculture activities. So of course you had a heavy engagement in pot, acid, and heroin. And a cool thing, there were these people called Hog Farm, and they would help people that were tripping a little bit too hard on acid, and they would help them come down, and then they would like kind of have those people serve as doctors and help and make them like go out and help them with other people that were tripping on acid. You would have morning yoga. You would have skinny dipping, which a lot of people hadn't done till the time of Woodstock. Reading a couple articles, and I think through the documentary, people kind of mentioned that. And then He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not, which was like a art performance or theater performance by these people called Earthlight, and it would just be women just picking flowers saying He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not. And you would actually have forms of protesting during the Who's set. They would have an intermission, and Abby Hoffman, who was a pretty big activist at the time, would come on stage tripping on acid saying free John Sinclair from prison. And John Sinclair would be sentenced to 10 years for possession of 2 marijuana cigarettes. So I feel like the legacy of Woodstock really is best summed up by Max Yasker in his speech. But of course, you know, the legacy of Woodstock, it's a true counterculture movement. You had 3 days of honestly just pure peace, and like, while of course there were problems, it's like everyone came together and just kept a good head, and like not like everyone just embraced each other and and just kept together. And as I said, Max Biasker really just says it the best. I can't do it as well as him.
I don't know how to speak to 20 people at one time, let alone a crowd like this. But I think you people have proven something to the world. Not only to Town of Bethel or Sullivan County or New York State, you've proven something to the world. This is the largest group of people ever assembled in one place. We have had no idea that there would be this size group. And because of that, you've had quite a few inconveniences as far as water and food and so forth. Your producers have done a mammoth job to see that you're taken care of. They enjoy a vote of thanks. But above that, the important thing that you've proven to the world is that 500,000 kids, and I call you kids because I have children older than you are, 500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music, and have nothing but fun and music. And God bless you for it. This on?
So now Woodstock would be met with encores. So 25 years later, Woodstock would host a 25th anniversary, and this would be called Woodstock 94. And during my research, I couldn't really find anything that went wrong during Woodstock 94. I think it went pretty smoothly, until we go to Woodstock 99, which was a complete disaster. If you thought the conditions of Woodstock 1969 were bad, Woodstock 99 is a whole time worse. It's like the porta potties or the bathroom system there malfunctioned, and just human excrements were everywhere. People were basically bathing in their own filth, and it was just very disgusting. And there would also be burnings and just kind of public rioting for no reason. Like I believe Woodstock had only 3 fatalities, and Woodstock 69, and I think Woodstock 99 maybe had like double that. I'm not exactly sure. But I know this video was kind of long, and I do apologize for that. But there was a lot to take away from this documentary, and there still is. And I highly, highly recommend going and checking it out. I'm going to try to leave some takeaways in the little discussion board below. But I want to ask you guys a question that you guys can maybe talk about on the discussion board. But my thought was, while rewatching this documentary, how would Woodstock go about if it was like hosted somewhere differently? Like, we've learned about different places in America that were experiencing like, like like Vietnam, civil rights, like a whole bunch of things that were going on in the 60s. So, given how those communities were, how would Woodstock affect those communities and how would it be perceived for the people? So, that's just a question to think about. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Again, sorry that it was so long.